And welcome back, everyone, to the Connected Teamwork Summit. We are going to continue this conversation. I'm here with Vignesh Shetty today. He is a senior vice president at GE Healthcare and many other things I'll talk about in a second. How are you doing, Vignesh, today?
Doing good. Hood. How are you?
I'm well and really nice to see you. And thank you for seeing you on the screen again. I had a wonderful podcast with you a few months ago. And what struck me from that podcast was how purpose led your life is and how you go about things. And so that's the topic also I wanted to talk to you about today about how you can be in service together, which we call this team defining moment number four. We've talked about sort of the four, what we call white belt moments, getting to know each other, appreciation of play, goal setting, and now getting to know each other. So um, let's talk about this moment and about like how can we be of service together in this particular segment. And Vignesh comes to us with plenty of experience. He is in he has experience with over decades of building and launching and scaling innovative products across healthcare, digital, and AI, healthcare, life sciences, and networking, in GE Healthcare and also in Cisco. Many accomplishments, creating big businesses, creating hiring and mentoring people, creating a company that runs at high velocity standards, leading complex projects. And again, what strikes me most about what you've shared with me in the past, Vignesh, and what I admire about you is how thoughtful you are about the purpose you lead from. So, welcome.
No,
Glad you're
thanks for
here
having
today.
me again.
Yeah,
It's always
yeah,
a pleasure to talk to you.
yeah. Great, wonderful. So, tell us a little bit more about serving together and how you actually create connectedness by being very clear about what you are in service to.
Sure. Maybe what I will do is I'll share something that I don't believe I've actually shared with anybody before. Um, it's not a story of bits and bytes, which is the world I inhabit, as you probably know,
Yes.
but actually of brushstrokes and bonds that my wife immerses herself in.
Wow.
So this is a story that resonates with me personally about connectedness and of being of service to your point. Right? I think it was May 2017. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. My wife, she likes to paint, and she was having challenges getting into the zone and getting inspired. And my younger son uh, was asking her to get back to painting because he had seen what she could do and what she isn't doing. So, but an opportunity arose for my wife to mentor aspiring teen painters from underserved schools.
Mm,
Initially, she was a little apprehensive because she wasn't sure if she, given the state of mind, given that she wasn't getting that spark, would she be able to make a difference to them? But she was touched by the students' eagerness to learn basic techniques that many took for granted. And in just passing that knowledge on to a receptive next generation, what happened is that she rediscovered her spark that comes from connecting around a craft with people who care.
mm,
And then with time, her rapt young mentees relit within my wife her own beginner's fire. And that
mm,
curiosity drove her to take more risks, engage with more contemporary styles. I'm not the expert, she is. And return to artist groups, which ironically led her to make her best art after this mentoring session. And more importantly, she's ended up building bonds with them that are stronger than most friendships today. So for me, the key insights that I wanted to highlight was you could A, rediscover yourself through the act of giving. Sometimes the greatest masterpieces aren't just on canvas, but on the tapestry of human connection.
mm.
And turning your attention to guiding others often lights our own path so that you can grow, receive wisdom, and collectively push us beyond the boundaries of solo success. That kind of was what I took away from my wife's experience.
Thank you for the great way also you're putting that, very poetic, like the great tapestry of human connection is where we get to paint and express. Now, how have you experienced this in your own life, this lesson, that insight that your wife and through her experiences, basically through giving and giving to the greater, something was sparked in herself. How have you experienced this in your own life and leadership working with teams?
Yeah, no, great question again. So again, let me just think about the several of these incidents. So let me see what comes to mind. I can think of one that I think most resonates. Is this was when I am in Wisconsin, so this is when I just moved here. I think it was the winter of 2019. It was a pretty extreme winter. It was a polar vortex season, the kind of winter that turns breath into smoke and makes even the bravest shiver. So we were inside a conference room in G Healthcare, and our director of digital platforms for AI, he felt a gnawing fear because he knew we were going to miss deadlines for an AI algorithm that we were working for with the MRI team back then.
Mhm.
Now, this individual was a master of leading teams or master himself of building complex algorithms, but he felt a little lost in the weight of his what he thought was his team's impending failure. And he was part of my organization, so he and I were having a connect. Right? That evening, he we spoke. I said just go back, trust your instincts. But then it wasn't so much what I said. But when he went back that evening to his house, he found a story about African lions in the savannah, right? And I think the bottom line was gazelles, as you know, have little trouble outrunning even the fastest of lions. But these
Mhm.
lions have a clever trick. They do this in the Serengeti. You can go. I think that you can Google this. I googled it, and turns out it's true. It's not folklore.
Mhm.
They place the old and the weak lions on the other side of the herd, and while the young ones come on this side, and then the young ones come within visible distance of the gazelles, but they don't go after the gazelles. So what happens is the gazelles head towards the older lion, and the older lion isn't in a position to actually cause any harm.
Mhm.
But the expectation of the older lion is they roar as loudly as they can. And what when they do that, even though they are on the other side, the roar would scare these gazelles, make them run away from the noise. But as they ran straight into the jaws of the waiting younger lions. Right now, here's the thing you want to think about. Why am I telling you this? The
Mhm.
gazelles had a choice. They could either run away from the roar, which seemed safer but was actually more dangerous, or
Mhm.
they could run towards the roar, which was
Mhm.
actually in reality safer, though it appeared more dangerous.
Mhm.
Because the person who was actually roaring wasn't in a position to do anything significant in terms of harm. So
Mhm.
this got this director thinking, and he came back the next day and he started an initiative within his team saying, "Let's run to the road." It
Mhm.
encouraged the employees, his team, to share their vulnerabilities, to take calculated risks,
Mhm.
and learn from failure.
Mhm.
That server room, which was once just a sterile hub of data and bytes and bits, actually became a breeding ground for innovation that was fueled by both stories, by shared journeys, and by shared experiences. And
Mhm.
if I look back now, years later, right, that particular team with the algorithm that they built has become one of the best selling products from the portfolio that we have today. And then,
Wow.
so the lessons that we learned in that Milwaukee room, inspired by the African lion's courage, is actually echoed now across the world, proving that sometimes the greatest innovations spark not from algorithms but from the roar of the human spirit. That's kind of what I would say is something that comes to mind.
The human spirit that then can get tricked by the roar. And what you're saying is, no, you walk towards it. You walk
Yes,
towards it. You even run
run for the
towards it.
roar.
You run towards the roar. You run towards the roar. That's a t-shirt. And I love that you're saying that. It's like, we need to run towards the roar. How did that uh, story inspire people to actually give more of themselves? Because it sounds like that's what happened. How did that actually happen? Can you give an example of how that story then changed what was going on in that group?
Well, in simple ways, the one thing that, for example, I give you an example of what used to happen before, right? Before the team used to come in, they view themselves as somebody who's responsible for a set of tasks. And each person had a different definition of what the bigger picture was. And more importantly, they didn't share their vulnerabilities. They
Mhm.
kept it to themselves. And all that they voiced was the end result, meaning the concern was that they will miss their dates or they won't be able to deliver. But they didn't really scratch the surface and explain why they felt that way. Was it that they were counting on somebody else's help and they were just weren't comfortable asking for it, or they didn't count on that other person to be able to put their hand up and sort of provide that helping hand when they needed it. None of those things are coming out. But when this director went back and actually shared this story, and then he helped them apply that story in tangible terms and how they could change the way they work, it created a space for psychological safety. I think this is just my interpretation of what I think
Yes.
happened. I mean,
Yes.
I'm no expert in the space, but what I noticed after that is meetings were a lot more filled with a lot more fun and laughter.
Ah, yeah.
There was a lot less focus on, hey, can I deliver it or not, and more on, hey, here's where what I'm seeing. Am I looking at it the right way,
Mm.
or is there somebody who can shed light on something that I'm not doing that I should be doing, or thinking something
Mm.
that I should be thinking that I'm not thinking? So that this notion of this growth mindset, where it was less about outcome orientation and more about let's just focus on being more present and help each other, I think
Mm.
completely shifted both the frame of thinking and ultimately the end result, because now it
Mm.
is by far the best selling product by far, right? There's nothing else remotely close to this in terms of impact to end customers. And most of patients all over the world who are going through an MRI scan indirectly or directly benefit from that innovation that happened back then.
Mm. So Vignesh, as I think about what you're saying, it sounds the importance of being clear what you're in service of. Are you in service of this smaller goal, which may lead you to run away from the roar, or do you put yourself in service of this broader goal, this broader purpose, which is let's grow together, let's learn together, let's put ourselves in service to being present. Different. That's a very different orientation than the very binary. You're late, or you're on time, or you're early, which
Yes,
sometimes happens as well.
yes.
So tell us, Vignesh, how have you applied this orientation of being in service in your own life? How have you applied that in your own life? Because I sense there's so much of that.
Yeah. So first let me start by saying that this is still work in progress, right? But the way I've been trying to apply this in my team is first understand what the source of the disconnect has been.
Mm,
Before we go down to trying to help solve the problem, can you help really understand why disconnectedness occurs in the first place?
mm,
So, for example, one of the things that I've witnessed is, and sometimes we've seen teams so disconnected, they almost use carrier pigeons to communicate across their desks. And it's almost a true story. Now, but for real, this was a case in during COVID, the pandemic. We had to build a project for again, a platform for a large hospital network in the US.
yes.
And um, I don't remember the exact timelines, but we were supposed to integrate the data from various set of sources. I won't bore you with the details, but we had to take data from electronic health records, medical devices,
Hmm.
patient surveys.
Hmm.
It was an ambitious project. It was time
Yes.
sensitive. Obviously, it's in the heart peak of the pandemic. Lives were being lost, and we had to make sure that we build this out in time. And the team had faced several obstacles along the way.
Mm,
So what the pandemic had also done is this team was used to in the past pre-pandemic working face to face in a room, great camaraderie. But unfortunately, as you know, it had disrupted the work environment and the communication model. So they had to switch to remote work. And what that led to is it led to reduced face to face interactions and a different mode of collaboration than they were hitherto used to. This is not a new team, it's a team that used to work well,
right. Right.
just not used to working remotely with each other.
Hmm.
And then there was the emotional stress, as you can imagine, and the uncertainty caused by the pandemic, which affected their motivation, productivity.
Mm,
So, so as a result, they felt disconnected from each other, from the project's purpose. They started to lose trust, respect.
mm,
Hence, they started to not communicate as much as they used to. Right, and what so happens was each team member had like maybe different expectations, different assumptions. Somebody wanted to deliver a high quality product, others wanted to meet a deadline and a budget, and we just realized that we need to get together. And so,
mm,
one of the things we did, which is I think your question is, this is the situation we found ourselves in, where the teams are disconnected. how did we apply some of the learnings to build connectedness in the moment? Right?
Mm.
Is that right?
Yes, 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 absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we tried to do, and that's why I said it's work in progress, is we try to dive into the why together.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is we don't the natural course of action is to dissect failures. Why did this happen? What could we have done differently? But this team started to try and even celebrate success and dissect success too. They started to ask, why did we win?
Mm.
Not just why did something fail? To
Mm.
learn, to grow, and to
Mm.
avoid complacency. That's also being in service, because if you celebrate small wins, you're actually being of service, because you're helping people objectively look at things they've done well, not just things they could improve on. And this is also, by the way, how you avoid the winner's curse, because sometimes teams that have succeeded in silos believe this is the success formula, and they end up staying disconnected because they have inertia working for them,
Yes,
and
yes,
they
yes.
sometimes can't distinguish between luck and skill. So that's one thing that I believe we started to do differently.
Thank you for that, Vignesh. We're going to take a short break. After the break, I want to dive a bit more with you in this. How does Vignesh do this in his own life? Like, how have you put yourself in service? How and what decisions have you made based upon being in service? What I took away already from our conversation here is that putting ourselves in service of a bigger goal allows for more authenticity, allows for people actually to speak up. It putting ourselves into service, into creating a more compelling context, like running towards the roar, can provide a culture of vulnerability where people can share with each other what's actually going on, and based upon that, keep achieving together. Could take a short break and we'll be back. I'm speaking to Vignesh Shetty. There you go. Right, Vignesh. So tell me about some choices and decisions you've made where the orientation of service made the difference.
So one of the choices I've made, both personally and again when I have conversations with my team on how they structure their priorities, is to be able. And this is something I was taught by a mentor: is am I building incentives into whatever we call it, performance management plans, prioritization, where team members get rewarded, including me,
Hmm.
for driving my peers' outcomes. It's not just whether I delivered against X. So a lot of my priorities when I have a conversation with my boss, and I do the same thing with my directs, is yes, you get a certain amount of credit for delivering on what you said you will deliver within the time, within the quality, within the budget. But more importantly, how do you do this even when you recognize and reward your peers? How do you make them successful?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happens at home. Like when I talk to my kids, it's not just about that the older one succeed in doing what he said he'll do, but if both he and the younger one need to go for a shared outing, or they want to watch a movie, they only get that reward, or the carrot, if you will, if they've demonstrated how they made their younger brother or older brother successful, right?
Ah.
And if they can't demonstrate that, even if they've met their end of the bargain, they don't get that shared reward, which typically
Mm.
because that's one way to inculcate the sense of being larger than yourself. Right now, the jury is still out on whether that's working or not. It's an experiment. I'll let you know in about a year whether that's a best practice or something to avoid. But it's definitely something both my wife and I have been working with the kids at home on, and we do the same thing at work. And I try and practice that in my performance reviews as well. And the idea is to again go. It's when it comes to the team. One of the things we are trying to do is we obviously still do the team building exercises, but it's more focusing on real stories, shared journeys, vulnerabilities where A has helped B.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, A didn't even know he or she was helping B, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
B brings that out in the team meeting, saying, "Here's how A helped me when and she didn't even know it," right? And that kind of creates
Mm.
a sense of moral upliftment that I think is more sustainable than a team building exercise where everybody enjoys it. They create something for a day, a week, they come back, and it's not as what I've noticed is not as sticky.
Right, right. So instilling this mentality of helping each other, making that core
Correct.
as an orientation, that creates connectedness that lasts. I'm just curious, Vignesh. Think about the situation where somebody helped you either grow or succeed or be something or do something that you really wanted. What was your experience of that? What was the impact of that?
Yeah.
Maybe
So
as a way to bring that home for us.
sure. This is a story of I'm thinking which I'll pick one which comes to mind. Yeah, of my mentor back in my previous company. This is when I was in yeah, a first time people manager, and clearly my focus was on vertical growth. So I went to him, and I hope he listens to this because I owe him a debt of gratitude. Is hey, I know what XYZ. I don't know what I need to do to get promoted. I think I've been doing everything in my power. I'm just not getting the recognition I need, so on and so forth. And what he asked me to do, which resonated with me, and I use that example shamelessly without giving him credit, I should, is say, learn from the young trees in the Amazon rainforest, Vignesh. And I was a little puzzled by his statement because I'm talking about how do I grow in my career, and he's telling me about young trees in the Amazon rainforest. And what he really meant is like he said, look, all of these young trees dream of growing tall enough to see the vast forest surrounding them. They all want to grow 100 feet tall, but they usually what happens is they are sprouted in a spot of dense underbrush that blocks nearly all of the sunlight from reaching their little branches because they're still tiny at this point.
Mm, mm,
So while many of these nearby saplings stretch themselves thin, all of the trees around them are really trying to rise above the others so that they can extract the maximum amount of sunlight because it's a competition out there.
mm,
Right? What these young saplings did was they decided to dig their roots deep into the fertile soil, knowing that in some ways in darkness strength grows from below because they're surrounded by taller
mm,
trees. They
mm,
can't necessarily, it's not a race to the top. Let's dig deep down.
mm,
And that patiently they strengthen their foundation year by year,
mm,
and they ignored the other trees that were racing straight up
mm,
on fragile stems towards the dim rays of occasional light that you get in
mm,
the Amazon rainforest.
mm,
What typically happens is at some point a tremendous storm will strike, and when that happens, it whips the forest with howling wind, with rain, with torrential downpours. But the younger trees that put dug their roots deep, they stand firm
mm,
because they focus on anchoring and became a
mm,
source of stability amongst this chaos. All around them, the trees that had maximized their reach upwards plummeted in this
mm,
wind.
mm,
And so when the clouds part, the young trees that had stretched themselves taller were all over, they were down. And this one was the ones that had anchored themselves were the only ones left standing. So his basic message is sometimes investing energy in depth and being slow is the best way to go fast. And
mm,
I think that is something that if as leaders each of us can remind first ourselves, our team, our family, that it's not always speed and velocity that counts. It's being
mm,
able to focus on your foundational values. And in leadership and in life, the path that leads to great heights often begins by cultivating invisible roots, whether that's
mm,
of skills, of
mm.
characters, of relationships, and a narrow focus on advancement can leave one unbalanced. I think that's being of service, and that was what my mentor did to me back then. Mm.
So much in this conversation, Vignesh. We're learning from the trees in the Amazon and the gazelles as well, running towards the roar. Um, I'm very touched by this. It's almost like a countercultural piece of advice to dig deep, to dig deep and not rush, to dig deep to allow for the roots to settle and go deep before before this outer growth starts to become clear. Um, we are getting towards the end of our conversation, Vignesh. What would you say to somebody who was unclear of what to be in service to? What would you say to them?
My suggestion would be, I'm just paraphrasing what I think I've shared, is one, if they're unclear what they can be in service to, just spend time asking the right questions. And so ignite a shared fire, try and understand what the shared purpose is, as opposed to focusing on solo sparks.
Mm,
Because the second thing you want to do is to try and really understand a place where you can add maximum value in terms of, being of service. Respect any dissenting points of view and ignite constructive debate. So
mm,
when there's conflict simmering, try and dig a little bit deeper to understand what's causing the conflict, and that automatically in most cases presents an opportunity for you to be able to be of service to whoever it is that you want to help.
mm,
And one way you can do that is presenting others viewpoints. Somebody who disagrees with you, can you present it as powerfully as you do your own? Right, that's another suggestion I would do. And
mm,
lastly, I would say, and this is something more on the, um, if somebody looking for tactical concrete steps that sort of supplement what I said above, what we are trying to do within our teams and our company is sort of borrowing from the IKEA effect and saying, try and IKEA it. Channel fun with hackathons, with mentorship programs. Try and look for as many experiences where you can build shared memories, because you know what, the famous IKEA effect, right? You love something more when you put in an effort together.
yeah.
So can you create more and more opportunities for us to identify through serendipity what are those opportunities for shared success? Because
Mm,
leadership is rarely about one man shows.
mm.
It's about a stage where everybody shines.
Wow. Love. Find find ways to contribute together because you love that more. That you contribute more to. Make sure that you ask the questions of what's really going on to get to the root cause so you can actually be in service to a collective purpose. Learn to hold the dissenting view as clearly and with much care as your own. Learn from the gazelles, run towards the roar. Learn from the young trees in the Amazon and grow your roots. Listen to the spark that can be ignited simply by being of service. Like thinking about your wife's example, there were so many lessons in what you said, Vignesh. I can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and wisdom so generously with us today. Being of service, talking about this topic of being of service together. We've been talking with Vignesh Shetty, who is a senior vice president at GE Healthcare and also a magnificent leader and human being, so dedicated to service and many other things. Thank you for sharing today, Vignesh.
Thanks again for having me.
You're welcome. My pleasure. We're going to take a short break and then we'll continue with a introduction of what we call the connected teamwork game, which will be led by my colleague Andre Oost from the Netherlands Growth Leaders Network. So we'll take a short break and I'll see you then.